In this video, I will be going over checkpoint 1. Okay, here's our first question. It says to simplify the expression by combining like terms. Okay, so remember, yes, we have all these fractions here, but we can use a calculator to help us. So I'm going to start out by separating my terms. So remember in the lesson 1 video, I would draw these slash marks in front of my plus and minus signs here to separate my terms. Now I need to look and see, well, which of them have the same variable so I can combine them together. If I look at this first one, 4 over 3, this has an A. This 1/2 has a B, so I can't combine those because they're different. And 1 over 3 also has an A. So that means that when I am combining these, I'm going to combine 4 over 3A. And then this plus sign is going to come down with this 1/3 A. Okay, now let's look at our next variables. So I have B's next, right? I have a 1/2 B and I have a 5 over 2B. Now this is why I like drawing these lines in between and that I think they're helpful. If I notice, there's a subtraction sign that is attached to this term, right? In between my two slash marks, this minus sign is with this negative 1/2 B, which means that when I write it down here, when I go to combine it, I'm going to have a negative 1/2 B. And then over here in front of my 5 over 2, there is a plus sign, which means I'm going to bring my plus sign down for 5 over 2B. Okay, then remember that when we are adding together our like terms, we're adding the numbers and we're keeping the variables. So this is going to be some fraction with an A, and down here it's going to be some fraction with a B. So let's type these into Desmos to see what we get here. I'm going to make Desmos a little pull out so that I can view it at the same time. Okay, so for my first fraction, I have 4/3 and I'm adding it to 1/3. Okay, so you can hit this fraction button again, remember, type in 4, click on the bottom, 3. Don't forget to click in front of it to get that cursor to be in front of your fraction. And I am adding together 1 over 3. I'm going to hit this button to convert it to a fraction, and I get 5/3, which means that this fraction is going to be 5/3. Now let's do our next one. So next one is this negative 1/2. So I'm going to put a minus sign for my negative, and then I'm going to write 1/2. And then I'm adding 5/2. Whoops. See, I forgot to click in front of my fraction. And when I forget to click in front of my fraction, you can see how I added the plus sign in my denominator. I don't want that. So I'm going to backspace. I'm going to click in front of my fraction, and then I'm going to do the plus sign. And then I'm going to have 5/2 over here. And this gives me 2. So that means that this is going to be a 2B. Okay, so now I have combined my terms. I cannot add these two together here because they are different variables, right? An A and a B are not the same, so I can't combine them. So now all I have to do is write them next to each other. So my first is going to be 5 over 3A, and then I have this 2B. This 2B is positive, so I'm going to have a plus sign in between them. So since that 2B is positive, there's going to be a plus sign in between them. So 5 over 3A plus 2B is going to be our final answer here. All right, next question. Our next question here says that Hattie purchased 12A pounds of apples and 4B pounds of bananas from the grocery store. Then she used 2B pounds of bananas and 7A pounds of apples making pies. If A is the cost per apple and B is the cost per banana, which expression represents the total amount Hattie spent? Okay. So with this question here, let's kind of think about what these numbers mean in terms of this situation. If you go to the store, right, and you buy 12 pounds of apples, and then you also get 4 pounds of bananas, that is fruit that you currently have, right? So that would represent a positive amount of fruit because I have that much fruit in my house. So our 12A and 7B, or sorry, not 7, 4, are going to be positive, okay? Because that is how much I currently have. When Hattie goes to bake her pies, if I start with 12 pounds of apples, and then I need 7 pounds to put in my pie, I'm taking those apples that I have, I'm peeling them, I'm chopping them up, and I'm putting them in my pie. So I no longer have those 7 pounds of apples for me to eat, right? Because they're in my pie. I guess I could eat them, but they're not in the same shape, right? But that's not what the question's asking. I just want to know how many regular apples I have left. So when I'm using those 7 apples to bake my pie, I'm losing 7, which is why this is a negative 7. Same thing with the bananas. She's using 2 pounds of bananas. So she's using 2 pounds of bananas, which is why this is a minus 2. Okay. From here, all we have to do is combine our like terms. So I have this 12 and 7. So all I need to do is add or subtract those and keep my variable. When I have 12 minus 7, that is 5A. And 4 minus 2 is going to give me 2B. Okay, so again, all we did was subtract our numbers and keep our variables. So if I look here, I have a 5A and 2B, which means that my expression would be 5A plus 2B. So 5A plus 2B for this one. All right, our next one says that Bobcat football coach logged on the following yardage gains and losses over 4 plays of a game. Okay. And then we want to know what is the net yardage of these 4 players. So right here, we have whether they're gaining or they're losing yards. Okay. And what we need to do is determine whether a gain or a loss is positive or negative. Well, if I'm gaining 25 yards, gaining is another word that represents a positive number, right? If I'm gaining $25, I am going to have $25 more dollars. Same thing here with yards. So this gaining 25 yards is going to be positive. So 25x here, that's going to be positive. Then I gain 0.9 y yards. That's also going to be positive. The next one says I'm losing 12y. Well, if I lost $12, that would be a negative amount of money because I don't have it anymore. Same thing here, where if I'm losing 12 yards, that's going to be a negative 12y. And then the last one, I'm losing 5.2x, so I'm going to lose 5.2x. From here, I need to combine my like terms. So I'm looking for which ones have the same variable. 25x, and I see a minus 5.2. So 25x and a minus 5.2x. The next one, I see I can combine are these y variables, and that's 0.9y and then a minus 12y. Okay. Notice that I'm not adding these numbers together here because of these negative signs. When I'm writing them next to each other, these negative signs tell me to subtract because they go with it. All right, from here, all I need to do is type in these numbers into a calculator to get my answers. So the first one, when I have 25 minus 5.2, so 25 minus 5.2, that gives me 19.8. And this next one here is 0.9 minus 12. So another thing you want to remember when you're typing stuff into the calculator is you want it to look exactly the same as your problem over here, except we don't want these variables in it. So here 25 came first, 5.2 came second, 0.9 came first, 12 came second. So just make sure that what you're typing in looks like your problem over here. Another way to kind of double check. So that gives us with this 19.8. Don't forget your x. And then negative 11.1y. So that would mean that the final formula or expression that represents this situation is going to be 19.8x minus 11.1y. Okay, so that's going to be our final answer for this problem. All right, next one. So this is very similar to the one that we just did, except instead of a football field, we're talking about Tiana's bank account. Okay, so she's either depositing or withdrawing money. And we want to know which expression represents the change in her bank account for this month. So I'm going to do this one the same exact way we did the other one. The first thing we need to determine is whether or not depositing and withdrawing, which one of those represents a positive and which one is a negative. Well, if I go to the bank and I deposit money, I'm adding money to my bank account. Since I'm adding money to my bank account, my number of total money that I have is going to get bigger, which means that deposit represents a positive number. So this 275 is going to be positive. When I am withdrawing money, I am taking money out of my bank account. So since I'm taking money out, my bank account is going to get smaller. So anytime I see a withdraw, that is going to be a negative. So this is negative 1 over 8b. Another withdraw is going to be negative 1 over 4b. And then the last one is a deposit. So that's going to be a positive number. Okay. Here I can combine my two regular numbers, right? This 275 and this 320. I can add those together. And then the last things that I'm going to combine here are my fractions with my b. So this is a negative 1 over 8b, and I'm going to subtract that from 1 over 4b. So again, let's bring back our calculator to help us with our math here. I have 275, and I'm adding it to 320. Whoops. 320. And then I have a negative 1 over 8. So I have negative, my fraction, 1 over 8. Click in front of my fraction. And then I am subtracting 1 over 4. So minus my fraction sign, 1 over 4. I'm going to hit this button to convert that to a fraction for me. So this tells me that my final answers here, this number up here, 595. This one is negative 3 over 8b. So when we look at our answer choices, we want to pick one that has a positive 595 and a negative 3 over 8b. So positive 595, negative 3 over 8b. All right, next one. Okay, so here it says at a community bake sale, Justin earns 1.5 C selling cookies, 2.25 M selling muffins, and 1.9 B selling brownies. He paid 0.3 B for the ingredients, 0.19 C for cookie ingredients, and then 0.59 N for muffin ingredients. Which expression represents his profit? Okay, so this one is similar to the ones that we have been doing. However, it's just a different setup. Okay, at this bake sale, this is the first three numbers we have here. This is how much money Justin earned. So if he's earning money, that's going to be positive, which means that I would have a positive. So this 150C will be positive, 225M is going to be positive, and 1.90B is going to be positive. Then the second part here where we have all these three numbers, these are going to be negative. And the reason why is because this is how much money he had to spend on his ingredients. So he is spending money, so he's losing money when he spends it, but he has to in order to bake, right? So I'm going to take these three numbers and I'm going to write them next to the variable that matches them. The first one they gave us was this 0.30b. I am going to write that next to this over here. because they have the same variables. And I'm going to put a minus sign in the middle because that is how much money he had to spend. So since he's spending, again, that's negative. The next one is 0.19c. So I'm going to write that next to this. And the last one is 0.59m. Okay. So final step here is going to be typing all these into our calculator. So I have 1.5, and I'm going to subtract that from 0.19. On these ones, make sure that you're always double checking your decimal places. It's easy to accidentally forget one or just put it in the wrong spot, and that'll change your answer. All right, next one, 2.25, and I'm subtracting 0.59. Third one, I have 1.9, and I am subtracting 0.3. Okay, so that leaves me with this 1.31c, 1.66m, and 1.6b. Okay, so when we look at our answer choice, I see the 1.13c, sorry, 1.31c, 1.66m, and 1.6b. So the theme with these projects, with these questions is that you want to make sure that you have some sort of paper that you have when you're doing these, because it's hard to look at the problem and do this all in your head or be able to keep it straight in your head. If you're able to write them down next to each other, like I have been doing this for every single problem, it makes it a bit easier, because once I can see this, I know, okay, well, all I have to do is subtract my numbers and keep my variable for each one. Okay. And if you notice, once we found our first one, this one here, that was the only one that had this 1.31c. So I could have stopped right then and there because I knew this had to be the answer, because that's the only one that had the correct c value. All right, next question. Which expression is equivalent to this? For this one here, we have to kind of look at it and make sure we're keeping the signs with the right numbers. Okay. So the first, what it does is it groups for you. So kind of like how I did before, how I grouped all these numbers, this problem is setting up that grouping stage with you. So if I look, I have a 3.1 here, and I have a 2.2 here. Both of them are positive, right? There's no negative sign attached to either of those. So when I'm looking through my answer choices, I'm looking at these three here because all three of these are both positives. It is not this first one because this negative 2.2x is not the same as this. Okay. So let's look at y's. When I look at y's, this 2.4y has a minus sign in front, and this 1.4y has a minus sign in front, which means when I'm looking at my answer choices from these bottom three, I'm looking for one that has both negative signs attached to both of my numbers. So a negative 2.4y and a negative 1.4y. And if I look, this is the only one that has a negative sign attached to both. This third option is negative. However, it's the wrong number, right? This 3.4y, that's just a regular 3.4. There's no y attached to it, which would mean that this option here would be the correct one. So the first one, I have both positives. Second one, I have both negatives. Make sure that it's the 1.4y. And then this last one would be 1.9 and then a minus 3.4. Next question. So for here, we want to know which expression is equivalent and what is the value of a. Here's one that we haven't seen yet, or a type of problem we have not seen yet. So we're kind of working backwards here. Okay. And I know that my original problem is 2.4x minus 3.9y, minus 1.2x plus ay. Okay, so I need to know what is the value of a. And if I'm being honest, I don't really need to worry about these x's that I have in this problem because I know what my final x value is going to be, and that's not going to help me figure out the y. So I'm going to ignore all of these x terms, and I'm going to write this as minus 3.9y plus ay. And when I add these two numbers together, it is going to give me this 1.2. Now remember that when we are combining our like terms, we're just combining our numbers and the variable goes along with it. So to make this look a bit simpler, I'm going to rewrite this without my y's. So I have a minus 3.9. I'm adding some number a, and when I add them together, it's going to give me 1.2. Okay. So from here, I need to figure out what a is. I need to go, well, what number plus a is going to give me 1.2? If you want to, since we have a calculator, you can guess and check this. Okay, and you can honestly get very close with guessing and checking. So if I have a minus 3.9, right, let's say I add something like 10. I'm going to just add 10. Well, 10 is clearly way too big, right, because I got 6.1. So let's try it again with something like 5, because 5 is half of that. Ooh, that's very close, right? 5 gave me this 1.2. That is super close to the, 5 gave me 1.1, which is very close to the 1.2 I need. So let's try adding some decimals to the 5. Let's try 5.1 and see what we get. And when I try this 5.1, that gives me 1.2, which means that this missing number that we need for this problem is right here, this 5.1. So A is going to be 5.1. So the missing value of A is 5.1. All right, last question here. Simplify the expression by combining like terms. Hopefully by now, this one is honestly the easiest one, I think, on the checkpoint. And based off of all the other questions we've done, hopefully this should be a walk in the park by now, right? Because I know that I need to combine my like terms. Let me copy my expression here. Make this a bit wider. Okay. Remember that when you're given problems like this, I always draw my slash marks in front of my plus or minus signs. When I'm looking here, I need to determine what my like terms are. Hopefully you're saying, well, I can combine my x's, right? Because I have 3.6x here, and I have a 1.7x there. Now, with this 1.7, there's a minus sign in front, so I'm going to bring that with it. And then with my other two, these are just numbers, right? And I can combine numbers because since there's no variables attached to them at all, they're plain numbers, those are also like terms. So I have 5.9 minus 2.2. And this is a minus, again, because this 2.2 has that minus sign in front, so I'm going to bring that down. From here, I'm going to type both of these into my calculator. So starting with this top one, I have 3.6, and I'm going to be subtracting that from 1.7. And then on the bottom one, I have 5.9, and I'm going to be subtracting it from 2.2. So this gives me 1.9x, 3.7. So all I need to do is write them next to each other now. So I have a 1.9x, and I have a 3.7. This 3.7 is positive, which means I'm going to have a plus sign in between. So for this one, simplify the expression. Our answer should be 1.9x plus 3.7. All right, that is the last question on this checkpoint. If you have other questions or need some extra help, please let me know.